This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe a high-energy, professionally certified epigenetics performance consultant. He understands firsthand how a stressful and taxing career can challenge your body and mind's ability to perform at its highest level. Identifying the links between your current lifestyle and impediments to optimization is just a first step in your ability to perform at an even higher level. This is Terry Clark. The Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Hey, Terry, and welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron leadership movement. I know that all our tribe members are excited to hear this conversation for sure. And for all of those that are out there listening to us, Terry and I just spent the last 20 minutes having a great conversation without the record button on. And I guarantee you we will go back and revisit some of the stuff because we are pumped up already to talk with each other. So, Terry, welcome to the tribe.
Jim, I couldn't be more excited. I think this is going to be fun, and I hope that the people that listen have as much fun as you and I are.
Yeah, me too. That's for sure. And, one of the things that I read in your bio that I think everybody's going to be interested about because it's not a familiar term to most people, including myself. You're a certified epigenetics coach. Can you spend a couple minutes talking about what does that mean in relation to taking care of other people and the human dynamics of it? And what is epigenetics?
Well, it's a great question. So let's look at my company name is called Above the Genes. And that is the literal translation of epigenetics. Epi is Greek for above, and then genetic is things relating to the genes. So one of the things that I've learned throughout my career in law enforcement, and since then, I've both consulted and worked with information technology companies that serve the government. And part of my role there was a translator, basically to speak law enforcement to technologists and speak technology to law enforcement people, because
that's not an easy thing to do.
They don't speak the same language. They're different worlds and they have different priorities. And so they can both have great intentions and both be very good at what they do. But at the same time, they'll talk past each other because they don't understand the terminology, the jargon. So learning there that I bring to this space and wellness is that you have to use plain language. So epigenetic is the proper term for a whole field of study. And for folks to understand it, it's actually it means above the genes. And I can give you a pretty quick, what I hope is plain language enough explanation of how it works in terms of your biology.
Sure.
Everybody knows their genes and their pairs of 23 pairs that are in their DNA helix. And helix is it's a spiral staircase is how it looks. And each rung on that staircase or that ladder is called a SNP. And a SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism. But I won't throw that.
That's a big word. That's not plain language.
Well, sometimes when you're talking about biochemistry, you have to use the actual term and then try to make it understandable.
Right.
So each one of those lines of code that there are billions of in the human, they've identified how a number of those are related to specific manifestations of your wellness in your personal experience. So, for instance, there's one called an APO, that's APO, small e, and then it's a number sequence 1 through 4, and there's two of them together. So it's an APOE4 was the one that they found is correlated with the Alzheimer's disease, for instance.
Oh, wow.
And it also has manifestations that are related to something called hyperlipidemia, which means having too much of a certain type of cholesterol in your blood. And that can relate to your cardiovascular risk factors. So that one gene out of all the billions is one of the ones that these research scientists now that work with NIH, the National Institute of Health, and many others around the world when they're doing their studies now of humans and the ways that their lives are impacted by their environment and the choices they make and the substances that they ingest or their history in terms of their family and what they inherited, they look now at the SNPs, those single nucleotide polymorphisms in the bloods of the individuals, and they relate what they find to the differences in the genetic code. And so we're gaining more and more knowledge every day, ever since they did the Human Genome Project, as they map out more and more of the ways that those individual lines of code that are on each rung of that ladder impact our wellness. And so when we talk about that, we want to realize that the choices we make impact the chemicals that are floating around inside our cells every time they replicate. And we all know what a chromosome, or we've heard the term chromosome.
Sure.
There's a chromosome inside each cell that tells that cell what it's going to be and how to operate when it replicates into another one of its cells that replaces it, because we keep replacing our cells every second of every minute of every hour of every day so that we can continue to live. And they've actually seen on these electron scanning microscopes that when those chromosomes that are packed very tightly into your cells, when they unspool into a single line called a chromatid, that if they were strung out, each chromosome, when it's strung out, would be over 6 feet long inside every cell. That's how much code is inside each cell.
Holy cow.
And so what happens is that you know about your DNA, and you understand that those 23 pairs you get from your parents dictate a lot about what happens to you. And that's in your line. That's in the code that you inherit from your parents and their parents and their parents, going out, right? And the thing about epigenetics is that when that chromatid is unspooled as your code is being replicated into that new chromosome for that new cell, it's like the spine on the back of an animal when it leans forward and it opens up.
Yeah.
Chromatid, as it opens up, there are tiny little threads that have spools on the end of them, and there's 4 of them on each line, and those are called histone. It's histone. They're histone tails, and those tails are impacted by the biochemical environment of the cell that's present when that chromosome replicates. And that biochemical environment is dictated by how you live your life. Those hormones that are impacted, those other aspects and nutrients that are in your blood from your food or from your environment, from the air you breathe or the water you drink, or the way that your body processes stress chemicals like cortisol, all those things that happen based on whether you had enough sleep last night and whether your lymphatic system was able to cleanse out your body, and whether you're stressed out by your primary relationships or your work, and whether you meditate every day, and whether you manage your breathing and keep your respirations low and your carbon dioxide at a good level, and whether you exercise at a certain level, a certain number of minutes per week. All of these aspects about the choices that you make, they impact the biochemical environment that impacts that histone tail. And those are your epigenetic impacts that dictate the difference between your genome. Your genome are those letters. Each rung of that ladder has A's and C's and G's and T's, A, C, G, or T at every stop on that code of that rung of the ladder. Those are the genomes. There's the A, C's, G's, and T's. But the phenome, PHENOME, is the way that genome manifests. And that phenome is all dictated by the choices you make in your life, about all those environmental choices you make that dictate the biochemical environment.
So Terry, let me make sure I understand what you're saying then, because I think this is going to get down to the nuts and bolts of how I want to pull this string on what you've said so far. You're telling me that things like nutrition and supplements and sleep, environment, your athletic performance, hormones, all that stuff is absolutely connected through science that you can validate affects you day to day and long term. So are you telling me this? And this is, I guess, one of the ultimate questions that I'm chasing after also, is that, the people in our audience are senior executives. And if you have two senior executives that both want to be coached in leadership, say, but they have the same education levels, they have the same amount of training, they have the same amount of experiences in whatever industry they're in. Are you telling me that a way for a senior executive to move the needle on their performance at work and personally could be connected to everything that you're saying right now?
Absolutely, and it's incontrovertible, and you can prove it through science.
That is amazing because I will tell you, there are so many executives that are out there right now trying, one, to find the magic pill, which there never is a true magic pill, but they're trying to find a competitive difference between themselves and their peers. They just are, just like in anything, but in business, to be a high performing organization and a high performing senior executive, you do have to find these little skill sets in life that can make the difference between you and a competitor. So I'd love to kind of maybe dive. I'm taking a million notes as you're talking here, but can you get a little bit deeper into some of those things that you were mentioning? First one, I'll just start off with, you mentioned about nutrition. How important is nutrition to the corporate athlete, the senior executive? How obviously this relates to any human being. I get that, but how important is nutrition to someone?
It's hugely important. It cannot be understated how important the composition of the nutrients that you put in your mouth are to how you live and how long you live and how well you live.
So it's more than just, eating pizza every night and a hamburger and things like that. And everybody goes on the different fad diets, right? Whether you're keto or, you're primal or paleo or nutritarian, vegetarian, the Mediterranean diet. Are there some through your research that are more aligned for kind of the North American, senior executive kind of thing? Are there some basic staples that you think should be a foot stomper?
Well, I want to caveat my response, and that is that nutrition needs to be precision determined based on your
Mm,
own DNA because different folks could eat the same diet and have
gotcha.
different outcomes.
Okay,
So
that makes sense to
I
me.
want to caveat that with that, and I'll give you just a real quick example of why that is. There are some folks out there that actually will have an extremely negative impact in their life from eating a largely vegetarian diet.
Hmm,
And if you follow any of the blogs or any of the Instagram or any of the stuff that's out there in terms of what all the gurus say, you'll find that the people tend to think that the vegan diet is like the utmost healthiest diet that folks can eat. They'll espouse that and they'll say why. It's because it's all natural. And when people say things like it's all natural and they use these broad strokes, my detector goes off
right.
uh, because we all, in our own personal experience, have known someone that's done great on a specific diet who then told their friend, "Man, you got to try this diet. I lost 30 pounds in the last 8 weeks and I feel great. I'm sleeping great and I've never felt better." And the
Yeah.
friend will then go try that same exact diet and will actually adhere to it and will find that they might even gain weight or have no benefit
Sure.
from it and might actually disrupt their sleep. And we've seen that.
Yeah,
I have.
absolutely.
And
Everybody has those examples. You bet.
the reason isn't that
You
the
bet.
person did it wrongly. It's that the diet wasn't ideal for their DNA. And so what we suggest to folks, and I'm going to answer your question, but
Sure.
I wanted to lay this out there and get people to kind of take that in.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's best to actually get your DNA tested and to find out what your SNPs say about which diet is going to work best for your body. Because while we all share like 97% of the same DNA as humans, that 3% that's different is really significant in terms of how our body reacts to the inputs we give it.
Hmm,
So that being said, the general answer is that most folks of European descent will do best on some variation of a Mediterranean diet, given what we know from population studies today.
interesting. Now, how available is it to the common person to have a DNA test that's specifically focused on getting these type of results?
We have my association is with the company called Apeiron. That's Apeiron. It's spelled ape iron. And the company is actually Apeiron Zoe, so ZOH, and that's Greek for limitless life.
Oh, wow.
And those of us that have trained and are associated with this company and this group of people, we actually have a philosophical belief that there is a ideal way of living your life, and that the person that lives to 120 has already been born. And when we talk to folks about what their limits are, and we like to say there aren't really any limits, if you look at some animals that they've identified now, including the tardigrade, which is an animal that's at a microscopic level that actually has been completely dried out and has had water added back in years later, and it is reanimated. That it has lived
Hmm.
in radiation. It's found all over the world in different puddles of water, and it seems to be an animal that can live forever. So we talk about the fact that there are animals that don't have limits on them. And when I talk to my friends or my clients, and I say to them that they could live to 120, I have a number of people that say to me, "Well, who would want to live to 120?" And I said, "Well, break that frame that you're holding that 120 in, and don't look at somebody
Yeah.
that was 80 that you thought was, infirm, wearing, Depends diapers, that had no sex life, was living in pain and was demented. Think about yourself at your best, and now you've just lived 100 years and you're still able to do all the same things that you like to do now, and you do them without pain and with ease. Would you really want to not be here anymore if that was a possibility?"
Yeah, because that's exactly right. Everybody has got this framed idea of what old is, and that's not necessarily the right framework for sure.
No, I mean, we can't do anything about the chronology, but we can
Yeah,
do something about the quality of life. And what we're learning from science is, even though this is a complex system, we always want to get that out there, that this is highly complex. That's why you can't tell people just do X or just do Y.
sure.
You got to actually look at what the science says, look at the individual, and then conduct little mini experiments where you say, this intervention makes sense for you right now. And then you give it 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and you measure it and you say, is this making your life better or not? And if it is, then let's do more of it, maybe tweak it a little. But if it's not, then let's go back and make a different kind of a change. And so it's iterative. But as you
Mm,
dial these things in these different aspects of your life, and the choices that you make that impact the way your DNA is manifested, your phenome, as you make these choices with a coach who understands how to do this, you can optimize all these areas of your life, and you can be living the best life you've ever lived, with clarity of thought, being in the zone more, better relationships with your loved ones, pain-free movement, lower body fat if that's important to you, and a lot of us that is, but sleeping better and actually enjoying yourself better and being more valuable to the people you care the most about in your day to day.
I just, as you're talking, I just keep thinking in my head how many hundreds and thousands of dollars, people will desperately spend on chasing the latest diet fad and all that stuff. And if they just focused, again, we didn't talk about like how much an average test costs, if it's just in a reasonable amount of money and not tens of thousands of dollars, like it's just amazing that they could use that money to really find out who they are, to be that better person. So it if nutrition is very unique, that 3% of uniqueness to kind of each individual. You mentioned, I'm kind of going down my notes on what you mentioned here, but you said you also talked about supplementation. And I have always been a big proponent of certain forms of supplementation, just in forms to help your resiliency, like vitamin D and omega 3s and things like that. But um, is it through these same techniques that you find what proper supplementation needs to be, or is there some common supplementation to where we all should be paying attention to right now to see that we're deficient in?
Well, when you say right now, let's we don't know when someone's listening to this, right? Because once we create it and it goes out in the ether world, we don't know for sure what date someone's going to listen to us. So let's just tell people that it's April of 2020, and we're in the midst of the COVID timeout, right?
Yep.
I think that in terms of like for the right now, I think we're thinking most of us are thinking about our immune systems.
True. Obviously.
And
Yes, correct.
so if you look at what I'm reading, and I read this stuff every day, what I'm reading about COVID and about immune system health is that the vitamin D levels in the blood is impacting the way some people are reacting to being exposed to the virus. That vitamin C can really help your immune system deal with it if you are exposed. That melatonin is inversely correlated with severe negative reactions. Uh,
Hmm.
so those are just some that pop out to mind. Oh, there's also zinc. People are they're saying that zinc
Yep.
does a great job. So if you look at the treatments that they're advising right now in terms of early treatment or maybe even prophylactically, it's the HCQ, which is the hydroxychloroquine, the anti-malarial drug. It's
Hmm.
zinc, and then it's the Z-Pak of antibiotics. So those are the three top ones they're treating people with. But they say that copper is really important to be an antiviral, but your immune system reacts really well to having a robust level of D3 in your system and melatonin. They say that at higher levels of melatonin, actually people have a lower immune, the cytokine storm, they call it, that's really been
Yeah.
devastating people. That if you have higher
Yep.
melatonin, you have a lower degree of people being intubated and actually having to be put on ventilators. Uh,
Hmm.
but I want to caveat that again because in science, more isn't always better, right? There's
Absolutely.
there's actually a therapeutic dose, so you want to make sure that if you are taking melatonin, you're not taking some huge amount. It's actually I think like 3 micrograms is the proper dose per day if you have to supplement it. But what I tell people is the first thing they need to do is they need to get their sleep dialed in.
Okay.
And so once they dial your
Yep.
sleep in, that's true for everybody. When you say right now, let's talk about right now, and let's talk about not just COVID, but let's talk about always. This is one of those always and forever things. Your body does not perform well when it's sleep deprived. That's just a fact. And anybody that's ever paid attention to our lives knows that from our own experience. So let's dial our sleep in. That means you want to be getting at least 8 hours in bed a night.
Yeah.
And when I say in bed, that means you need to create the right environment for sleep, and that's preferably a blackout room, no light at all. That includes no LED lights from a clock radio.
Hmm.
No lights on from the thermostat or from the CO detector or coming in the window. You want to have a blacked out room, and you want to have a quiet room, and you want to have a cool sleeping environment. Now that's relative, right? Because depending on your body mass, we know some of us that are married know that if you're a larger person, that you're putting off more heat than some of us a smaller person, right?
Right.
So,
That's right.
I'm managing that actually in our bed with my wife that we sleep together. I went out there and bought this thing called a chill pad, and it's got two different cooling units with different temperature zones. So on my side of the bed, it's actually cooler than it is on my wife's side of the bed.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Right, so we can sleep in the same room environment at the temperature set at a level that we can find some agreement on. But then I'm actually cooler than her while we're asleep because I've got a lower number on that chill pad that I'm sleeping on than the one she's sleeping on.
So are you telling our audience that by paying attention to sleep, the way that you're going to perform the next day is absolutely impacted by the quality of your sleep?
Again, incontrovertible. The science is incontrovertible that people that sleep better make better decisions, and people that are sleep deprived. If you look at the Department of Transportation studies, they say there are actually more fatal accidents in the United States from people being sleep deprived than there are from people driving drunk.
That's amazing. I often wonder, I put myself in the shoes of a senior executive and those that I coach, and this seems like such a no-brainer when it comes to sleep. That when you're if someone's coming to you and saying, I'm looking to improve in performance, or I'm not impressed with the leadership performance or the decision making capability of the board that I sit on. Uh, how many times do coaches say, "Well, what is your sleep like?" I bet it's pretty rare.
Well, I think it used to be pretty rare, but I think that number's going up for people that are paying attention.
It is amazing that a lot of these things, when we talk about needing to be coached, and I'm a huge proponent, obviously, since I am a coach myself, of being coached, because you've got to have that outside perspective. But a majority of these type of things that we're going to be talking about today is just looking yourself in the mirror and actually making these types of changes.
Parts of it, yes. If you have the strength of will
Mm.
and the awareness, and then you're able to put programs into place to hold yourself accountable and measure your outcomes, and you have the intelligence to understand how to change your plans when your results don't match your goals. And those are a lot of ifs, right?
You bet.
And honestly, I mean, so you get coached yourself, right?
You bet.
I get coached. And
Have to.
and when I tell people who say, well, why do I need a coach? I said, well, let's just look at some examples. I said, do you know who Tiger Woods is? They're like, yeah. I said, do you think that he might be one of the greatest golfers of all time? And most people say yes. And I say, he's got a coach that helps him work on his golf stroke every day, right?
Right.
I said,
It's exactly right.
being
It's
a coin,
a great analogy.
right? I mean, if you talk to the top executives of the world, almost all the top executives now have somebody who they can talk to confidentially to tell the truth about their biggest challenges. And a lot of the work they're doing isn't somebody consulting with them about how to make their business better. It's coaching them on how to make themselves better as that instrument that operates in that organization.
Amen. Amen. Terry, I totally agree with you on that, and I hope this is one of the primary messages that's pulled out of this podcast is that the things that we're talking about has nothing to do with the subject matter expertise that a person is in, the business vertical that they happen to be in. This is about the person themselves, more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, they had a study. They had a study out in Northern California of heart patients that had severe angina, and they told them, and these are folks they couldn't even walk without pain. They weren't having sexual relations with their spouses, and they were given very short periods of time to live, probably until they were going to have a fatal heart attack. And they did a study where they gave the information to a certain subset of them on what they needed to do to improve their lives and have a better chance of living well and living longer and avoiding that fatal heart attack. They had another group that they had a support group that had the same information, and then they talked about it in a group and supported each other in making changes. And then they had a third group that had the information. They had individual coaches, and they tracked which ones 90 days or 6 months out were continuing to make changes in their life that were consistent with being able to live pain-free and to live longer without that fatal heart attack. And the coaching group did significantly better at adhering to the changes than did the other two groups. The first group that just got the information, almost all of them went back to their ways of life when they stopped the program. The support group did nominally better, but the coach group did the best. And that's because when you have an individual that's focused on you and your success and that's supporting you and holding yourself accountable, we know that you're going to perform at a higher level.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It seems like it's almost too simple to believe, but I think anybody who has come from any type of background that played a sport understands the role of coaching in those terms. And then from a senior executive point of view, coaching is so important. And you've said it earlier that everyone needs a coach. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't show that you are weak or are underperforming or anything like that. This is just that other neutral person that will push you beyond any point to where you would just do it on your own. It's that sense of accountability more than anything else.
I agree with you 100%. And Jim, if I could, let's just throw in a little parenthetic here for folks that are thinking about their wellness right now. And my belief is that the whole world is thinking about their wellness right now because a lot of
Yes.
folks are thinking about their life and their death. And that can tend to focus the mind.
True.
My relationship with my doctor is the relationship that I believe that every person on the globe who has the blessing of having access to a doctor, and we know that not everyone does,
Right.
for those that do have access to a doctor, the relationship with that doctor needs to shift from the patriarchal belief that that person is going to save you from whatever happens bad in the world into one where they see that doctor as their coach and their consultant. They hold the subject matter expertise about what you need to do to make your life better. But we all, as individuals, have to take accountability for our own wellness. And we have to make those decisions ourselves. And we go to our doctor to ask them for support in terms of information that they hold because they've spent so many years studying and they have
Right.
access to latest research and they have the ability to write prescriptions and to provide services to you to increase your wellness. But the relationship with the doctor has to shift, and the individual expectation of what their doctor does has to shift to where their doctor is actually somebody that's their consultant and their coach that they go to with their problems and they tell them the truth. They don't hide how many drinks they're having a night. They don't
Mm.
pretend that they haven't gained that weight they've gained in the last year. Because if you gained weight last year, you're probably going to gain weight this year, and it's a trend. And that trend
Right.
is what can kill you over time. So we need to take ownership for what we're walking around in. What I say to people is that there's only one per customer. And while you know what date you were born because you have a birth certificate, what you didn't see on that birth certificate was the other date, what it says your death date, but it's there too.
Right.
And the thing is that the death date, you have the most control over how far away that date is from the birth date. By the choice you
Mm.
make, you need to take ownership and decide, how am I going to live this life? How able am I going to be to help the people I love? And then I'm going to make choices in accordance with that.
It's pretty sobering, to be honest. I have not viewed my doctor in those terms, Terry. I view my doctor as the person I go to when things are wrong. I've got the flu. I've sprained my ankle. I'm there for the yearly checkup. I have never thought of viewing my doctor as a coach,
Well, there's
and that's quite the aha moment right now.
well, let that land and then realize that some doctors don't want that role or aren't aware that that is the proper role for them in today's world.
True.
So you need to look, if you've got insurance, you're not locked into your doctor.
Right.
You can find a doctor that fits with what you expect of them. And I suggest to folks they find a doctor that understands that paradigm and is willing to join them in that new way of doing business. And honestly, doctors don't have that much time per patient in our current sick care model. They have to spend so much time per patient. So then there's going to be a nurse practitioner someplace, or there's going to be a physician assistant someplace that does more of the time consuming work. And those people are more willing to give you a little bit more time because of the economic model. And find a wellness coach. We have hundreds of coaches now that have been trained in the same program I've been trained in through a Peer Center, and they're available online to help people today. And they're looking for people to coach. And we're not the only ones out there. This is not a sales pitch. I'm just telling you that's
Sure.
one
Yeah. Yeah.
resource you have. But there are wellness coaches all over the country and all over the world.
Yep. And again, it's kind of interesting. A lot of the people that will be listening to this podcast, they're trying to find tips and tricks and how to make things better. And this is some of the stuff that's been just very close to all of us, but I think many just live in denial of. Somebody's just looking to write a quote down so that they can repeat it, or what's the name of the latest book that you're reading so that I can read it and become just as smart and a better leader that way. And I think this is such a foundational, fundamental conversation that we're having today with you, Terry, that, it kind of starts here. It starts with you, the person in the mirror, and all of those kind of things.
Right. So I talk to people, Jim,
Yeah.
on your point, who haven't looked at themselves naked in the mirror in years.
Mm.
And I go, well, why not? And they're like, well, I don't like my body. Do you think it's going to get better by ignoring it? And they said, well, no. I said, well, what's wrong with your body? I mean, you walk around in it every day. Why would you not want to see it? And they're like, they're embarrassed.
No, it hits home. There's no doubt. I think everybody at some point in their lives have gone through those things or living through them right now. All of that. And again, it's one of these things that are such the obvious points, but is in such a mental block for so many of us. It's interesting.
When I
How
say that, look, Jim, I have met you face to face, and I don't know what your body type is, but I can tell you that I'm not at my ideal perfect body weight today either. And I'm in my late 50s, and it's not easy to get what you want, regardless of your diet and your supplementation, your sleep and your exercise. That life happens to you, right? And sometimes you get injured, and if you're injured, then you can't necessarily exercise the way you want to, but you have to do it in another way. So look, we all have challenges in our lives, and to expect everybody to be at that ideal place seems very unrealistic. So let's just admit that. And then let's say we can do our best today, and we can love this body that we've been given in whatever condition it's in now, even if it's not the ideal body that we'd like it to be today. We can love it the way it is, and then we can do our best today and tomorrow to move towards treating it the way that it needs to be treated if I want it to be there for me over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Oh, that's beautiful. And before you can love others, you got to love yourself.
Well,
you know,
we've all experienced that, right? Some of the most difficult people in the world to deal with are the ones that don't even like themselves, right?
that's right. That's exactly right. How are still staying on this kind of thread we're pulling here? You've mentioned athletic performance through your research. Have you? Again, I'm trying to maybe find something a little different than the standards that we all kind of feel are the same things that have been preached to us that we feel is kind of the norms. Exercise 3 times a week, minimum of this amount of time. We all have smartwatches now that tell us to get up and move and how many stairs we've climbed a day and all of that. What are some of the most critical things that you've seen that truly affect a human being when it comes to athletic performance, the exercise regimes and things like that?
Well, as we age, and I say that, I say we, and I say age generically, but let's talk about people that are in the later decades of their life that are, let's talk about octogenarians, people in their 80s, right?
Mm,
One of the leading causes of death of people in their 80s is falls,
yep.
right? And so what I like to do is, so just a little background on myself briefly was that before I left ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, my last job was Chief of Violent Crime Intelligence. So I was mapping gun crime across the United States, and I was looking at homicides from firearms use, right? And
Hmm.
so when we tried to reduce the homicide rate in the United States, we'd look at the cities with the highest per capita gun violence, and then we'd look at the data from those departments that showed the individuals that were the most connected to the shootings. And then we'd go out and conduct investigations, and we would investigate individuals for illegal activity, and we'd arrest and prosecute them, and we'd incarcerate those people. And as we took those people off the street, the homicide rate would drop in those cities, and then we drop the homicide rate across the United States. That's logical, right?
It is. I'm following you.
So let's think about how we can live longer as individuals and live our best lives. And the process that I like to look at is I look at the statistics and I say, what are the most common causes of death in the United States? And then I look at the ones that are preventable. And I realize that many of the ones that are killing the most people are preventable. And those are heart disease, right?
Yep.
Dementia, falls, alcoholism, drug abuse, stroke. Many of those diseases are things that our behavior can prevent their occurrence. And so it's sobering if we take responsibility for living our best, longest life, and we think about falls. Falls are just one,
Yep.
and we can impact the risk of fall by increasing our strength, particularly our lower body strength, which has to do with our balance in our hips, and then our actually literally our balance. We need to do balance movements. So you want to be doing exercises that are single leg, right? Or doing things that are a little
Yeah.
off balance to some degree. And you want to be also working on mobility and your joint health so that you don't get too tight and you don't lose your ability to articulate your joints to their full range of motion, because
Yep.
those limits can make you less able to deal with getting off balance. If you notice, you're walking from a sidewalk down to a street, or if you're climbing upstairs, or even if you're like getting on an airplane and you have to duck and then turn and then lift a bag, right? You can see
Right.
those things that we take for granted when we're young and fit and healthy, how people that get older have a tough time with what we consider to be simple things.
Yeah.
So if we want to live longer, healthier, one thing we need to do is maintain our hip strength and our mobility, and we have to maintain our balance. And so whatever exercise you do, there are other things that are important about what it does to you metabolically. And I can talk about those epigenetically, about how intense exercise flips genes in your cells that make your genes more robust and less likely to get diseases like cancer. Because cancers are aberrant cells that overgrow because your control systems are missing or weakened, right?
Right.
That exercise also creates something called BDNF. Have you heard that term before? BDNF?
I have not.
Okay. BDNF is brain
Yeah,
derived neurotropic factor. And
I have not heard that.
the way that it works is that this is increased in your brain as a result of exercise. And the minutes you exercise and the intensity of your exercise, the more the increase, the more BDNF you create in your brain. That
Okay.
BDNF has been called miracle grow for the brain. And so what it does is when these numbers are higher in your brain, it creates an environment that your brain is able to form new synaptic connections at a higher rate. So we all know that every day as we age, we lose a certain number of synaptic connections, and that's just as a result of our brain saying, "Well, I might not need this because I haven't used it lately." So things that you haven't
Right.
used in your brain, your brain will winnow those out over time. But one of the ways you can make your brain more resilient and make dementia less likely to happen is by learning new things. But you can learn new things and retain new memories better when you have more BDNF, which is present as an outcome of exercise.
I'll be darned. And you said that it is definitely tied to intensity though too, right? Like
Yeah.
which has been the trend for hit and things like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
with
There are a lot of
validation
ways to
behind
do
it. Yeah.
intense exercise, though. I belong to a CrossFit, and I do the weights, the Olympic weights, and the jumping and all that stuff. And I've had some joint problems, and so I get challenged by some of the results that I have because of the things I did in my body as I was younger and playing sports. But I don't use that as an excuse not to do them. I just have to moderate and do certain movements that don't put me in positions that are more likely to injure me. And
Yep.
you have to have. I like to think, Jim, that as we've aged, we've gained a little bit of wisdom.
Let's hope. Let's hope. That's right.
But you know that when you were in the military,
Yeah.
you used to sometimes say things like, uh, "Pain is just fear leaving your body."
Oh, many a time. Yep.
Well,
Many a
pain-
time.
sometimes pain is
Suck it up. Not just suck it up.
right.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
pain is your body telling you to knock that crap off.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So
I there's no doubt that my 50-year-old body is paying the price for when I was a 20-year-old and thinking that I could just bounce off of the ground and keep going
and-
and not realizing the damage.
but you know what? Sometimes those things you did, you had to do them because it might have kept somebody else alive.
Oh, sure. You bet.
And so there's a
You bet.
trade-off.
And I wouldn't trade it. Wouldn't trade it for the world.
No.
That's for sure.
But my point is that, look, we all have limitations at any age. Some people are better at other things. And one of the things we can do with this epigenetic test that we run is we can tell you genetically what your strengths are. So we can tell you whether you are more likely to be somebody with a great VO2 max, that's your volume, oxygen
Yep.
capacity maximum, that you're more likely to have a cardiovascular system that supports a very high VO2. And so you might really be built to be somebody that can do longer distances or to be able to do more of a longevity type training, versus some people might have like sprinter muscle distribution of very high fast twitch fiber genetically. Those people might do better with free weights or with explosive sports. And that doesn't mean that you're going to have to pick a sport that your genetics says that you're good at. But what I find is that when I do these tests on people, people have sort of figured it out because the stuff they were good at was the stuff they liked, and they kept doing more of
Yeah,
it.
right. Yep. That makes complete sense. Of course.
It
So
does.
what, Terry, we've talked a lot about, like paying attention to what you put inside your body, how you could supplement that, how you sleep, how exercise plays an important role. What about if I'm sitting here and I'm a boss, I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, I can control myself. How can I make sure my workplace is a good environment or my office is a good environment? Because there is such a thing as environmental stressors too, right? Like, how do you pay attention to the external things that are affecting you? Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, what are some common things that are actually harming us that are probably around in many of the offices that we work in every day?
Well, every group that I've been in usually had at least one person that was known to be a little bit caustic or difficult to deal with.
Yep.
Look around the group, and if you can't identify it, it might be you.
True.
And,
Right.
that makes people laugh a little bit when they hear it. But the truth is that I've seen sometimes that the folks that promote that end up in supervisory management or executive positions, that sometimes that the filters they use to determine who should promote is not the one that dictates, are they the ones that get along with people the most or the best.
Yeah. Great point.
And so, regardless of whether your team has a bunch of great emotionally intelligent individuals or socially intelligent individuals in the group, the most important thing you could do for that group to operate better is to make yourself a better instrument of emotional intelligence.
Huh.
And that's something you can control directly
What a
with
great point.
meditation and your visioning, and your loving kindness meditation is one that they've done in terms of social awareness, that they've actually used it with first responders and found that people had less use of force incidents after 8 weeks of doing a loving kindness meditation every day.
Interesting.
And meditation
All
is
of it again.
phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Look, I don't like to say everything for everybody or make blanket statements, but I've never met anybody that doesn't gain from building out time every day to sit quietly and learn how to meditate.
Yeah. And Terry, I will tell you, I'm the first to admit that probably the first 35 years of my life, I did not. Maybe in some spiritual context, I did. If I said prayer to myself or something like that, but purposeful meditation wasn't until later in my life and my careers, and it's amazing. And the thing that woke me up the most to meditation was someone told me at one point, you can never hear yourself until you understand the silence of meditation, and then in hearing your internal self, to then be able to listen truly to your own thoughts and frameworks and things like that. And it really started to focus me on learning how to center myself. And it's just an amazing meditation's an amazing tool that I agree that I don't think there's a person on earth that doesn't benefit from meditation.
And to come behind that just a little bit, whether you use the term prayer or not, you don't have to actually be a religious person to benefit from a spiritual practice or a religious practice. They've seen that scientifically that the health benefits are very robust and measurable in terms of the genetic switches that happen in terms of your brain and in your cells when you take time daily to find that peace, to be awake, but to not be thinking and trying to solve problems, but just to be aware. And the ones that tend to have the best impact are actually the heart based meditations, where you clear your head and you focus on your breath and you get calm and at peace. And you just focus on that sensation of love in your heart, and you direct it towards yourself first, and then to the people you care the most about, and then ultimately to the people you've had a problem with or that you think you could never get along with. That if you get
Hmm.
that progression, you will actually provide healing energy to your own body. And when that session is over, you'll be more present and more able to pay attention to what people are really saying around you and not be in such a hurry.
I just am taking that in right now. I love the fact about being more present. think that's so important, and definitely am trying to have that with this conversation with you, Terry, for sure. And it makes me want to kind of pivot just in a small way to your thoughts on resilience. It's almost, we've been talking for 45 minutes about the human themselves and all these benefits, but and the last few minutes about the power of meditation. But how does this parlay into resilience? And what are your thoughts on what makes a person resilient? How do we embrace resiliency? And what are your thoughts on the importance of resiliency in stressful times and in crisis like we are in today?
That's a great question, Jim. And I'm glad you asked it because these issues and these matters that we've been speaking about for 45 minutes, if you add them up, they're all about resilience. So our dealing with our physical selves, our biochemistry, down to the cellular level, down to like our histone tails, which I think would be funny if anybody can actually remember that term after we're done talking.
I guarantee you there's many a note written down, though.
So
Yes.
the point is that at that really smallest level, and the only way to see a histone tail, as we talked about, was through an electron scanning microscope, which is impacted by those molecules that are floating around inside your cell. This all starts at that granular level. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Men in Black,
Sure.
but if you see the end credits after the end of the movie, where they go from where Will Smith has taken on these huge entities from these other universes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at how they go from that picture into to scaling straight up, and so we're actually on an atom on some other bigger animal's toe or something, right?
Right.
And then that animal is actually on an atom on somebody else's toe, and then you go up and up and up. My point of bringing up that crazy vision is that these small things that we take care of that we can control empowers us to be okay with the things we can't.
Boy, that's a powerful statement you just said right there. That is powerful. And how you so we do that. How do you view it? Like, when I talk about lanes of resiliency, I talk about it in its mental, physical, social, spiritual. There's kind of four pillars that I embrace to resiliency. How do you explain resiliency to someone that you talk to, someone you coach?
Well, I like to. I formerly was an advanced interviewing instructor, so I used to teach people how to get confessions. And one of the interesting things that we would do with folks, we were trying to support them in finding whatever their truth is, and then telling us what their truth is, right? Because
Right.
as an investigator, all you really want to know is the truth.
Sure.
So I think that as a coach, what I try to suggest to people is they have to know their own truth. And they have to get to that themselves, and they have to be able to tell it to themselves. So I suggest to them that they look at their ideal life and they envision what they would be doing with the people that they love the most in that ideal life at some point in a set future date. Let's just say 10 years from now.
Okay.
So let's look at where we are 10 years from now with the people we love the most and how we would spend that time. So you wake up, you feel rested, right? Maybe the sun's not up yet, but you get out of bed, there are no devices around. Just go to the bathroom quickly, get some water, go sit quietly someplace, you meditate, you get centered, you find the love in your heart, you spend some time in that space, you get out about your day, you interact with your spouse, you might interact with your kids, you talk to them about what their plan is for the day, you're able to move, maybe get a little exercise, go for a walk with the dog or with your wife or with your son. And then after that time, you go to your office space or wherever you earn your keep or where you impact the world, and you engage with other people. But you notice that your presence with them is one where you're available to them and you're actually listening with an intent. And you're not telling and you're not directing and you're not commanding and ordering. You're actually engaged with them on a common purpose to achieve whatever it is that you've agreed on to change the world that day. But you're able to do all that by laying this foundation of wellness. You're able to do that because you have clarity of thought. You're not anxious. You're not distracted. You're not depressed. You don't have foggy thinking. You have clarity of thought. You're able to actually use your energy in a way that makes the change in the world that you believe that you're here for, whatever your purpose is. And so we do that through taking care of our sleep. We do that through eating a nutritious diet, taking whatever supplements or whatever medications we need. We exercise. We spend time with the people we love in a good place. And we continue to learn and be curious about the world. If we do those things and we do them with people that we trust and we respect, then whatever day this is over, then we can think that, well, I did my best and I had a good life. If we start every day and we start our planning about being resilient with those ideas in mind, then it's all going to work out.
Well, Terry, wow. I am clear in thought right now as you spoke these last few minutes. I think all of us could hear a pin drop to the words and inspiration that you just gave us, because running through the minute our eyes opened in that day, that perfect day 10 years from now, and how to achieve it, and ending with that clarity of thought is that's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff, Terry. And I think that's probably a great place for us to end today, because I want to talk to you for the next 2 to 3 hours on unraveling this even more. And I think this is just a fine spot for all of our tribe members to end it on, because I think it's a beautiful spot to think about with this clarity of thought. So I'll leave the last words up to you before we end up on this podcast interview.
Well, Jim, I've really appreciated you inviting me. And I didn't know where we were going to go when we started, but I felt good about where we wrapped it up. I would just want to say to anybody that's listening to us that we all are all masters of our own destiny. We all get to decide how this is going to work out. So we just have to have faith in ourselves and the people around us and the power bigger than us, and that we're going to get through this together. And hopefully we can take this time and learn a little bit as we have this extra time and this space to decide, how am I living? How do I want to live? And what impact do I want to have on the world?
Well, Terry, you certainly had impact on us today. So again, on behalf of our leadership movement and our Iron Sharpens Iron tribe, we thank you for spending this time for us, enlightening us, and we are certainly bound to become masters of our own destiny. So thanks again, Terry.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week, talking to Terry about the performance areas of nutrition, supplementation, sleep, environmental health, athletic performance, and hormones. Really focus us on optimizing your performance. Don't forget, our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways and suggested action plans. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so we can continue to build the tribe. Join our Facebook group to get even more behind-the-scenes action and exclusive content. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.